Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 5th edition of the IRENA Innovation Week 2025. This has become a major biennial event for IRENA, and this year the focus is on renewables and digitalization for sustainable energy future. My name is Nolwazi Khumalo, and I'll be your Master of Ceremonies, and it's an absolute honor and privilege to be around great minds such as yourselves. I expect that we are going to have a phenomenal afternoon. I represent the International Renewable Energy Agency, where I lead and support efforts to strengthen national and regional energy planning capacities across Africa. At present, I'm involved in implementing programs in Eastern Africa, Central Africa, Southern African Purple, and as well as through the broad Africa Continental Power Systems Master Plan Initiative. It is my pleasure today to be your host and walk through the green track of the conference on the topic of renewable-based solutions for sustainable development. This session on this track will take place in this venue, which is the Kameha Grand Event. Over the next 3 days, we will present specific needs, challenges, and opportunities of innovation for the energy transition in emerging and developing economies. This is also the main topic of the upcoming Innovation Landscape Report, the third innovation flagship report of IRENA, focusing on innovative solutions for sustainable growth powered by renewables. The discussion of this innovation week will directly inform the study, and which will be released in autumn. Sessions will discuss grid modernization, bottom-up solutions and communities engagement, productive uses of energy, and also how to create value locally and enable renewable energy investments with innovation. We are proud to partner with world-class organizations for each of the sessions and to welcome leading experts who will share their insights and engage with us in meaningful discussions. The general rule of this session is to come curious, listen, connect, and live inspired. With that, I will introduce the first session of this afternoon, which is entitled Modernizing Power Grids for Renewable Future in Emerging and Developing Economies. So just to check that we are on the right session, there's also a parallel session which is called the Planning for the Future, Demand-Side Narratives and Scenarios, which is happening in the room opposite in the Kameha Universal Room. The main session of this afternoon will discuss the importance of grid modernization and grid resilience in developing countries. The session aims to explore innovative, practical, and scalable solutions in terms of enabling technologies, market designs, business models, and system operational measures to advance grid modernization and enhance the grid flexibility and resilience. This session is offered in partnership with the Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI Europe, and is also supported by the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance, UNEZA. The audience is encouraged to interact with the Slido code, which is being shown on screen. When you enter in the Slido code, there are 2 main streams. Please ensure that you select the green track, and you are able to interact and post your questions in the Slido. With that, I'm going to introduce the first presentations for this session. So for this session, we are going to have 3 presentations and 1 panel discussion. So the first presentation will be led by Gayathri. Gayathri is a program officer for renewable energy grid integration at the Technology and Infrastructure at IRENA. Under her leadership, IRENA undertakes critical grid assessment studies that serve power system operators worldwide. Gayathri, you have the floor.
Thank you, Nolwazi. Thank you for your kind introduction. And good afternoon, everyone here. I hope I'm audible. And we hope that you're having a great day so far. We sincerely thank you for choosing this session to be part of today's afternoon session. And we have lined up, like Nulvazi mentioned, we have some insightful presentations and a very insightful panel discussion arranged for you. And the panel discussion will focus on addressing the key challenges and solutions to grid modernization, especially from developing economies. It's our hope today that the session will provide you with informative and actionable takeaways to support your work in advancing grid modernization. But I would also like to take this opportunity to thank EPRI, especially Mark, for agreeing to be moderating and also being a partner organization for this. Thank you for that. And also UNEZA for all the support that you have given us. Can I have the next slide, please? Oh, sorry. I have it here, sorry. So as we all know, and I think we don't need to reiterate this, this has been the discussion in the morning and forever, I think for the last few years now, that renewable energy deployment is at the core of the energy transition. And tripling installed renewable power capacity and doubling energy efficiency improvement by 2030 are crucial milestones for us. The development of renewables can also act as a catalyst for ensuring a fair, just, and equitable transition for all, and also power sustainable economic development. Now, to create a resilient, secure, and affordable low-carbon energy system and provide universal access to all, we must overcome certain structural and systemic barriers that continue to be challenging. Despite this, I would say that the transition presents enormous opportunity to transform and modernize the energy system. And in the session of 2023, we tried to address this to some extent, looking at innovations that could support countries to improve shares of variable renewables, especially in the context of developing countries and SIDS. This was done keeping in mind that every country has a different range of technical starting points and realities. And when it comes to renewable grid integration, some of them have not reached full electrification, for example, and while others are island grids. Now, today, we are trying to go a step further and look at why grid modernization matters and what has been done so far to modernize the grid in emerging markets and developing economies. And we hope this will be a platform for fruitful exchange of ideas and help identify solutions that can be used to address similar challenges, and hope that it will also encourage collaboration and peer-to-peer learning. Like we heard in the morning, grids are changing, and they are changing for the better. They are now cyber-physical systems. They are no longer only composed of transmission, distribution, or generation. They are adding on communication, control layers, which cater to the inclusion of renewables in the systems. And they also try to ensure that demand response programs can be enabled. And storage plays a very big role in this. And all of this interact very dynamically. So grid modernization, if we look at it, entails a lot of investment, a large, significant amount of investment. And for every system, the above-mentioned characteristics like demand response, renewables, storage, all of that happens in varying degrees. So we need to look at systemic solutions that consider the specificities of the system. And to ensure that stranded assets can be avoided, duplication can be avoided, systemic planning is also required. Systemic solutions can help exploit cross-sectoral synergies like transport, heating, telecommunications, and therefore optimize planning and operations. It can also develop harmonized tariffs and incentives and access rules which align the technological solutions with market designs and regulatory frameworks. So IRENA has been working ever since its inception to identify innovations that can support the uptake of renewables. And in 2019, IRENA published its first innovation landscape report, which presented a toolbox of innovations that policymakers can use to integrate high shares of renewables. And in 2023, this edition of 23 edition of the report, it provided a new toolbox comprising of almost 100 innovations that countries could enable or countries could embed in their national strategies to decarbonize the end-use sectors. Now, decision makers, we understand from our evaluation and analysis, we understand that decision makers should adopt a systemic approach, combining innovations in technology, infrastructure, market design, system planning and operation, and business models. And continuing with this approach, we have the third edition of the report that discusses solutions to achieve sustainable growth powered by renewables. In this new edition of the Innovation Landscape Report, we discuss about 40 innovations grouped together in the 4 dimensions that I just mentioned. And this toolbox presents a very cohesive framework that enables that design of tailored solutions, reflecting the unique technical, economic, and socio-cultural needs of the different countries and circumstances in regions and communities. So this has been validated also through surveys and interviews of the stakeholders that we hope this report will be used by. So just to give you a sneak peek into one of the solutions or some of the solutions that we have discussed within the report, it's, for example, when we talk about improving data acquisition and monitoring or incorporating grid strengthening measures, for every solution that we discuss, the report evaluates the technology or innovation and provides an example where it has been implemented, especially in an emerging economy, to see how the system operation has improved, and also contributes to the following aspects of energy systems like affordability, energy access, energy security, and sustainable development. So we also evaluated the implementation costs in terms of prerequisites, stakeholders responsible for implementation, and the cost associated with it. So these are the key messages we hope to give out from the report that we have. So we feel that long-term and holistic country vision is mandatory or is as a prerequisite for the transition to happen. We must create forums for dialogues among policymakers, utilities, regulators, civil society to ensure that diverse perspectives are addressed. Also create value locally to reduce import dependencies, and also South-South cooperation. We hope to achieve that today, at least to some extent, and so that skill sharing, knowledge and skills and resources and expertise happen. With this, I also have to bring up 2 of our forthcoming publications. One is on powering resilient grids, like a grid modernization toolkit for islands. This comes from the grid assessment studies that we have done in the past, especially for islands, and one of our esteemed panelists has been part of this discussion. And this highlights the main challenges and recommendations from each of them, leading to tailored recommendations for specific technologies, grid codes, control schemes, and operational practices. And we recommend from the evaluation that we have done that countries should prioritize solutions and targeted upgrades, which are imminently required. Grid code upgrades using grid-friendly solutions like grid forming solutions, demand-side solutions, ancillary services. All of these could be options that countries can explore. And last but not the least, we have another publication forthcoming, which is on enhancing resilience, which is climate-proofing the power infrastructure. The objective of this report is to enhance the importance or highlight the importance of enhancing power system resilience and provide guidance and recommendations to policymakers to develop frameworks with the same objective. So the key takeaways from the report is to prioritize crucial vulnerabilities and identify resilience measures, then perform cost-benefit analysis and ensure proactive policies are put in place, and also ensure that critical assets are protected, and using distributed energy resources as one such solution to enhance resilience. So this brings to the end of my presentation, and I hope that it has been interesting enough for you, and I hope that you have gained some insights from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gayathri. Now I invite McGranaghan. Mark is a fellow at EPRI, located at EPRI Europe office in Dublin. Mark has been a leader in the areas of power quality, development of the smart grid, and distributed resource integration for over 20 years. You have the floor.
Hi, I'm really delighted to help organize this session with Gayathri, and I want to thank her for all the hard work that's gone into putting this together and the great panel that we have coming up. And I thought I'd very quickly just show a couple slides and share a few thoughts on this landscape of grid modernization and the importance of innovation in this space. And really innovation is the key to reducing costs, implementing technologies that can enable us to integrate more renewables and achieve our electrification goals, all the things that we need to do to move down this decarbonization and sustainability path really still require a lot of innovation. So working through this innovation landscape report and continuing to fund and support innovation is key around the world. One of the key requirements for integrating more renewables is flexibility, is getting to the point where we can get flexibility from all levels of the grid. We can engage communities and customers, as well as getting flexibility from large technologies like energy storage and pumped hydro and other new solutions that eventually will include hydrogen and molecules as well. But flexibility from all levels of the grid is absolutely critical. And when we get all this put together, we call this the integrated grid. It's a term that we've been using for a number of years at EPRI. And I like to think of it as a grid that, as part of global optimization, we enable local energy optimization to be part of that. So if every local community and customer is optimizing their energy use and is able to provide flexibility as part of that optimization, we can achieve much more efficient global energy optimization. And that's what the integrated grid is all about. And as we go into the panel, some of the innovation challenges that we see involve all aspects. They're not just technical challenges. They're regulatory challenges, they're market challenges, they're getting the different stakeholders to be able to integrate with each other from an interoperability point of view. They're partnership challenges. And as we put all those together, it is the way that we achieve the integrated grid. So I look forward to talking about some of these challenges around grid modernization and building the integrated grid in our panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I now invite Leonard Hülsmann. Leonard Hülsmann joined Energynautics in 2017. He has now more than 8 years of experience in power systems, with a particular focus on renewable energy grid integration, distributed generation, and smart grids. Leonard, you have the floor.
This one. Can I use this one? Or do I need to switch it on first? Test. Okay, very good. Excuse me. I like to move around a little bit when I speak, so I prefer that. So thank you very much. I will also add a little bit to my previous speakers, adding a little bit on what they have said, trying to give you a brief introduction from my side as well. I basically work as a senior energy consultant for Energynautics, being a technical consultancy in the area of renewable energy integration into power grids. And just to make yes, there we go. Just to make it a little bit more, trying to understand like what grid modernization means for us. We have on the one hand the transmission networks, where there's a lot of things happening from the planning and regulatory perspective. We have things like generation and transmission network development plans that are developed in many countries that can work on a regional or national level. We have, in particular, the inclusion of storage and sector coupling here. For example, you can see that the situation has quite dramatically changed in California, where 3 years earlier there was hardly any battery storage, and then suddenly there was a big impact of battery storage that is basically shaving the peak of the electricity consumption in the evening. There's other aspects in terms of the, I'm not sure where it is, that need to come into play. That's about market design, that's about ancillary service design. There's the grid codes playing a major role in this regard. And that's one part of the planning perspective, but then we obviously have the operational perspective for the transmission networks, where things need to modernize a lot. There's a new, like we just heard, flexibility of existing power fleet. There are aspects such as forecasting of the renewable energy sources. There's also new grid enhancing technologies. There's, for example, dynamic line rating. You have here an example from the Netherlands, where they have deployed that very majorly, the TSO there, TANET, across the whole country. And also other types of grid enhancing technologies, not trying to go on all of them. There's much more enhanced transmission management that you can do nowadays, but you need to all configure that and find your ways with that, be it for congestion management, be it for other types of operation of the transmission network. And there's also new aspects such as demand response now coming from all the bigger industrial, but also smaller household customers. And that's just one part of the picture. We have on the other side the distribution networks coming up. Yes, there we go. And also here we have a lot of aspects in the planning and regulation, from the planning and regulation perspective. We have distribution network development plans that are now being rolled out in more and more countries. Like this is, let's say, getting a much bigger requirement and thing in, for example, in European countries. There's about the, data digitalization in particular of distribution network infrastructure was formerly very undigitized. Like this is an example where we ourselves basically transformed the GIS data from a distribution network operator in Germany into so that they could run power flow simulations on that. There's also here aspects of grid codes and permitting processes. If they get hundreds or even thousands of applications every day and need to process them fast and efficiently. And also here, in terms of operation, we're talking about things like demand response. How do we make use of time of use tariffs, or even real-time tariffs? What about EV smart charging? Here's an example where already you can see the impact of time of use of real-time tariffs on the electricity consumption that goes down. The peak actually gets lower while it's basically filling the valley during nighttime. And then we're talking about controllability of distributed energy resources and their monitoring and automation through utility tools that can be used, including smart meters or smart distribution substations. So this just a small version from my side to give you a broader picture on what are all the technologies out there and what are all the aspects there. But this is obviously a very incomprehensive picture, and there's so much more that can be investigated and needs to be enhanced in terms of grid modernization. This means that in terms of how much grid modernization there is needed, this is from the IEA saying how much is existing today and will have major amount that will need to be replaced on the one hand, both in terms of transmission and distribution, and then we'll have to have worldwide a massive increase also of additional transmission and distribution network infrastructure. And a lot of that expansion will obviously also happen in the emerging markets and developing economies. And here really what will be a critical question is also how much can digitalization, smarter controls and automation, how much can that actually save in terms of that hard infrastructure that needs to go into the, that needs to come online. And I try to conceptualize this a little bit further when we speak about developing economies, we are also talking a lot about, of course, grid extension, even to customers that don't have electricity supply yet, or grid densification. For other ones, it may be really the rapid distributed energy resource growth in currently very weak grid infrastructure. For my personal projects, have seen that, for example, Vietnam had a tremendous growth of PV systems in just a span of less than 2 years. And that quite overwhelmed also the current electricity infrastructure there and the current electricity market setup. Or in other countries like Pakistan is just now seeing an extreme growth of PV, distributed PV in the country. And on the other side, advanced economies, they may have to grapple with legacy systems, how they currently dealt with the system, which is maybe not fit for purpose anymore. And there's also other aspects that are such as communication and interoperability aspects versus the other flip side where cybersecurity is potentially a threat to the system. And we should, when thinking about these aspects, we should also think that there can be also different pathways that may play a role. Like what will be the role of off-grid systems and solar home systems? And we're going to have a panelist here specialized in this area. What about emerging markets maybe leapfrogging certain conventional grid modernization efforts where they don't maybe have to follow in the footprints of certain advanced economies? And then I'm also wondering, maybe at some point, of course, we get also the issue of grid defection. This can be in particular in the global sun belt, for example, in Australia, but also later in other regions of the Earth. So hopefully giving you a little bit of aspects on insights here. Lastly, I just want to close out with that we, as a technical consultancy, we like to work, or we work a lot with Gayathri, who themselves cooperate a lot with IRENA. So I want to thank Gayathri and IRENA here for that. And we particularly support Gayathri in the areas of long-term energy planning and renewable energy grid integration. And yes, and certain aspects that we have developed with Gayathri and IRENA together was, for example, supporting them on the Continental Power Systems Master Plan, was just mentioned in before by Gayathri, and other studies. You can go to the website of Gayathri and check them out. There's many projects that we have delivered and or are ongoing, all in the field of grid modernization and related aspects. So thank you very much for your attention and looking forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe we can give another round of applause for all our presenters. With that, we move on to our panel discussions. The panel will discuss the barriers and solutions that exist to achieving a modernized grid. The panel will be moderated by Mark. I'll bring Mark again to the floor. Thank you.
Maybe I'll go here just to quickly introduce the panelists as they come up, and then we'll get started. Our first panelist is Abel Didier Tella, Director General of African Power Utilities Association, APUA in Africa, and a good friend from participation in the Global Smart Grid Forum as well. We run into each other periodically. Thanks for joining us. Manoj Gupta, CEO and Managing Director of TATA Power Microgrid in India. So we'll be hearing about microgrids. Eden Well. I only learned pronunciation this afternoon, and I'm sure I have it wrong, but I'm delighted to have her. She's a director at Palau Energy and Water Administration in Palau. Thank you. Then Getz von Stumpfeld, Innovation Regions for a Just Energy Transition, and a Just Energy Transition in Coal Regions. So thanks, Getz. And finally, Pimi Gisela, Chief Director of International Climate Change Relations and Reporting from the South Africa Department of the Environment. So thank you very much. It's a great panel, and look forward to the discussion. As we get started on the panel, we're going to start with involving you guys and Slido to see if we can get a little bit of feedback from the audience first. So we have 2 questions. So hopefully you've got this Slido up on your phone. You can scan that QR code. You can use the number. If you go to slido.com, you can enter the number. So the first question, you're going to choose. Okay. How sustainable? I think that's our last question, isn't it? Okay, we're going to do this one first, okay? You can only choose one of these, even though obviously they're all absolutely critical. And the question is, what is the most significant challenge in modernizing the grid in your region? Lack of investment, aging infrastructure, workforce and skills, policy regulatory hurdles, cybersecurity, lack of grid access, and we added supply chain to that equation. All these things are critical, but lack of investment rolling to the top. Without funding, it's very hard to overcome the other hurdles, that's for sure. And I agree, policy and regulatory hurdles, so that's a very interesting result. All right. Should we go on to the second question? Keep voting there. Should we go on to the second question? Can you move one slide forward? The second question is going to be on a ranking of 1 to 5. 1 is low. Not important. 5 is very, very, very important. How essential is grid resilience for achieving sustainable development and economic growth? Where does resilience fit in the equation? Okay, I'm going to move over here. Critical. Absolutely. Simple as that. All right, we're going to start the panel with a simple question that I'll have each panelist give a quick response to, and you can use that as an opportunity to give a little bit better introduction for yourself than I did as well. And relates grid modernization is obviously key to sustainability and renewable integration. As well as developing a more resilient system. So to set the stage, let's start with your thoughts on key policy and regulatory actions to modernize the grid, kind of policy and regulatory needs that we have. We saw that besides funding, that was the most important challenge that we're facing. So some quick thoughts on policy and regulatory considerations, and then we'll get into some more detailed questions for each of you. Abel?
We'll start with you. Okay, thank you so much, Mark. Like Mark said, from the Association of Power Utility of Africa, we incorporated today 58 utilities across Africa, have been created in 1970 with headquarters in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. And okay, today, you know, when we talk about Africa is very diverse. The countries are not on the same level of development. So the challenges come from the resource planning. Without integrated resource planning, we also that lack of investment. But lack of investment comes from no planning or deficit of quality of planning. Because for me, the resource to develop the sector are in Africa. So mismanagement of these resources can drive to a lack of investment that we are talking about. But the challenge is why we need to reach the last miles, we need to modernize and develop and expand the grid where the grid exists. So this challenge is unique for Africa because the average access today is 58%, heading to 70% with the last Mission 300 launched in January this year by the head of state. So you have the access, universal access, you need to modernize. You don't have access, you need to expand the grid. You have the grid, you need to fight to have a better operation of this grid to reach more with the few you have. So that is the challenges independent of the country. It's diverse across Africa.
Great. Manoj?
Thank you. You know, before answering this question, I have a triangle to share. This electricity is for what? For the end consumers who will use it, be the urban customers or rural customer. But then there is another system, which is your grid, which are traditional grids, which are feeding the customers. Now, on top of it, we want to go to use the renewable energy. And by nature, renewable energies are unreliable and uncertainty to a certain extent. On top, we want to integrate the smart grid to feed the end customers. Now, this is a lot of complex equations are there. But what we feel is until and unless the customer's needs are being defined and met through, all other systems may not fall play. I mean, it will not going the right way. So in terms of policies, all those policies are made for traditional national grids. Now, these national grids are not so smart enough to take care of new loads coming through. Earlier was treating as the customers, today is the prosumers. Also, bidirectional power supply is part and parcel of the end use. And with the sources like batteries coming through EV chargings and bidirectional system, the system becomes more and more complex. Now, the end result is that the systems which are going to be there, it has to be resilient and reliable to the extent and focus more on the renewable side. With self-healing grids, system would be there. In terms of policies, in India, we have National Mission for Smart Grid, which is improvising the policies which has to get aligned to these two requirements. Renewable, number two is the customer's requirement, and how does technology speak to each other to meet the end customer requirement? Thank you.
Very good.
Well, thanks, Mark, for the opportunity, and IRENA for the sponsorship. Well, coming from the islands, and it's kind of different because we're kind of isolated. We don't have such a big economy, but we get into the same problems because we have a very aging infrastructure. It's about a 40-year-old infrastructure that was built after the war, and the Japanese government had helped Palau. And right now, with all this movement towards renewables, it's like we put the cart before the horse. We have this new IPP with the introduction of renewables into this very aging infrastructure. We're experiencing more power outage. There's curtailment issues. There's a lot of issues. There's tariff issues. So we're preparing regulations. We're preparing our national policy in order to address all these gaps from modernizing the grid, automation, all of these issues are facing the islands. And to top it off, we're kind of isolated most of the time, but yes, we have that connection with the world. But in terms of being an island setting and with a challenging economy after COVID, we're addressing those issues. And like what we've been always saying is we welcome the expertise from our partner countries as well as international experts, because if we do realize our nationally determined contribution goal of having 70% renewable injection into the grid by 2030, I think we can do it because Palau is small enough to realize its goal. But at the end of the day, if we don't have that grid modernization happen on the ground, then all our islands and our isolated islands all around Palau is going to have I guess, problems having the integration of renewables into their systems. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Gets?
Test, 1, 2. Yes, thank you very much for having me. I think it's key, it's essential if you transform to renewables and if you invest in expand renewables to create an regulatory framework that gives the incentive structure to invest into the grid on the one hand, and on the other hand, that assures a socially just distribution of the cost between the different groups, so that there is a high acceptance and that the costs are not distributed unjust between different user groups, so because that might lead to political conflicts. Thank you.
Great. Pimi?
Thank you for that, Mark. I'm going to, in fact, give a perspective from the Technology Executive Committee in addressing this question from a climate change perspective. I would like to start by stressing that the energy transitions, they lie at the core of the mitigation targets outlined by the parties' nationally determined contributions to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement as one. In fact, until 2030, most stated investment needs for climate mitigation in developing countries are in energy sector, particularly in the power generation grids and storage subsectors, amounting to about 1.3 trillion annual in needs. Identifying priorities and key policy and regulatory actions to enable Paris-aligned system transformation is nationally determined process. Under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, developing countries particularly benefit from the Technology Needs Assessment process, which is the TNA for short, to identify such priorities and forge nationally endorsed implementation pathways for realization. To support developing countries with a dedicated guidance on technology options for energy transition, the UNFCCC Technology Executive Committee, which I'm a member of, has partnered with UNEDO and the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center to develop a guidebook as shown in the screen on renewable energy. The guidebook outlines a section on energy transition and distribution, covering technology measures such as dynamic line ratings, power flow controllers, typology optimization, advanced distribution management systems, conservative voltage reduction and voltage optimization, and mini-grid. Key consideration for the deployment of these measures are provided in the guidebook, including related economic assessment, affordability, mitigation and net zero emission potential, barriers to deployment, enhancing climate resilience of system, and just transition aspect. Each of these technologies contributes in a unique way towards mitigation and net zero potential goals. Some GLR reduce the need for new transition infrastructure by maximizing the use of existing transmission lines. Some PFCs reduce transmission losses by better managing congestion and distribution electricity for efficiently, which means less electricity needs to be generated. Some reduce outages through real-time monitoring, as well as reducing unnecessary generation, and some provide solution to reach remote areas. These measures drastically improve the efficiency of grid and consumer demand and facilitate integration of renewable energy in the grid, which in itself is critical contribution to achieving net zero. That said, ultimately, it is the responsibility and prerogative of countries on how to utilize such technology options. Individual or in combination, depending on specific national circumstances, aligned with development and climate priorities. But international actors could complement, catalyze, and accelerate national efforts on energy system transformation, and we hope that this guidance is helpful resource that end and encourage you all to make use of it. I thank you.
That's great. And I think that this focus on technologies that can help us use our investments more effectively is very appropriate. It doesn't change the need for funding, but it allows us to use that funding more effectively to achieve our goals. And with that in mind, I'm going to come back to Abel and ask him for maybe some success stories. You represent 50 different utilities in Africa, and what are some examples of programs and investments in innovation that have been, that you would be interested in sharing, or success stories that we can learn from?
Yeah, you know that, thank you, Mark. Africa is endowed in all kinds of energy resources, conventional and renewable energy. So how do we combine the two to make it great? You know that our basic renewable, despite we have solar everywhere, but where we can have basic load is hydro. Now, hydro have a specificity with the climate, everything. So the first is how to go on hybridization of hydro dam. So one country, Ghana, with the buoy power, now go hybriding the dam with solar panel. So the dam have 450 megawatt, and now the hybridization will be 50 megawatt. So now they have already floating solar on the reservoir, 5 megawatt going to 15 megawatt. So that first, reducing the water evaporation. Second, using more efficiently the resource, water resource. And 3, sending solar energy during the day and hydro during the night. Second one, we were talking about transition. For Africa, gas and nuclear, like in Europe, will be the transition energy. So we know that for now, only South Africa and Quebec have the first nuclear plant. The second one would be Egypt, with 2,800 megawatt nuclear plant, effective from 2027. But at the same time, the largest solar will be also in Egypt for 5,000 megawatt. So this kind of combination make the grid more stable, because without basic load, the reintegration of renewable energy will lead to collapsing the grid. And the last one, not the least, is Kenya. You know that one of the largest wind farm is Turkana Lake, 400 megawatt. Imagine that in 2019, in 10 minutes, Turkana Lake lost 380 megawatt, 10 minutes. The grid did not collapse. Why? They have geothermal, they have hydro, basic load. If not, they have been collapsed. The last story is very close to us. You know that we are working to integrate African network through integration of the regional market on the power pool, but Africa is already connected to Europe through the sea cable, Spain with Morocco. Last month, the grid in Iberic Island collapsed, Morocco and Portugal. What happened? Morocco sent 800 megawatt to Spain to restart the grid. If not, it's not workable. All the Europe grid will collapse if not this action going from. So Africa is developing the grid to integrate Africa, but also connected with its neighbors like Europe, and the next one will be Tunisia to Italy, and Egypt already connected to Middle East. So this is stabilization of grid by interconnection work already today. So tomorrow will be key because storage is good, but interconnection is better to secure renewable energy.
Those are great examples. Just quickly, any secrets to overcoming the financial and bureaucratic hurdles on these projects?
Yes, we have been talking for years that if we don't combine the mining industry with energy industry, we never can overcome poverty in Africa. The transformation of raw material, the energy used for domestic consumption is good, but for transformation is better. And it's better to count the country not having mine in Africa than counting the country we have mine. So all Africa have mining country. But exporting raw material is not the way to go. Transformation, local transformation require energy. This energy for industry will stabilize the grid, will create job, will create reliable off-taker, credit-worthy off-taker, and make the response better than developing the grid through consumption. Yes, all solutions will be good, but when you start using energy for industry, you have your income to finance the development of energy.
Right on. Very good. Let's go to India. Manoj, what are some of the technology priorities that you see? I know you're with the microgrid part of Tata Power, and microgrids clearly have a role, and I'd be interested in that. But other technologies that you see that are critical in India as we go to a more resilient and grid that can integrate renewables. Where's AMI, IoT technologies, DERMS, where does everything fit? What are some of the priorities?
Okay, so let me take the question forward from what he said. The blackout is the most critical thing which any utility will think of. So at Tata Power, we have been fortunate to provide power supply, reliable power supply to city of Mumbai, which is the financial hub of India. And while doing so, we have, at that point of time, all sort of generation fuels being used, coal, oil, gas. And now we transition towards green energy, which is primarily on the wind and solar. Now, at that point of time, what we have built a system called islanding system, which has helped us to isolate city of Mumbai from the national grid. In case of a grid failure, that is the national grid failure, the system operates on a technology called DF by DT, where it senses the drop of frequency and a defined frequency, it will cut off the system, and the system becomes self-islanded. And we have thermal generation, but primarily hydro generation was being used to take care of the power supply requirement of city of Mumbai. And that has been success story for decades to come. Almost 10 to 15 times islanding happened, and we could save the city. Now coming from the grid stabilization to the resilience and to the end customer requirement, what we've been seeing that whatever technology you bring in, customer is neutral to that. He needs or she needs a reliable power supply, and if it fails, how fast it can come at what cost it will come to him. So customers are interested how his energy bill can come down. And in that direction, Tata Power has been working on end customer requirement fulfilling that. And when you said smart technology, IoTs and smart meters, what we are going further ahead is to provide signature to the customer. Traditionally, what we get, a overall load, what he consumes in the smart meter technology, what time was the total load. We have gone one step ahead to say which equipment in the house are being used. Like for example, AC have a different signature, or heater has a different signature. Those technologies we are working upon to provide that insight to the customer, that what point of time this particular equipment has been operating, and hence the associated cost with that. In addition to that, we provide customer insight how this technologies could be utilized to bring the energy costs down. And that's the way we feel that is very successful. But while doing so, I'll take you back to the operations, like my colleague talked about. Operations is critical. Today, the smart grids are operated by central load dispatchers, which were earlier talking about few main grid lines. But when you go to LV side, managing few thousands number of LT lines going to end customer, because end customer consumes electricity, the technology, the capacity building, and the systems to take care of such requirements are very imminent. Imagine an operator sitting in the control room and sees that few customers have lost supply. The technology built into through IoT or AI to find out, is it a feeder level tripping or substation level tripping, so that the operator can direct the field staff to move to that point rather than waiting for end customers to call back. And this is what we call as proactive system reliability. And while doing so, at Tata Power, what we have done, created a self-healing grids, which will sense which is the faulty circuit. It isolates that faulty circuit and restore power supply. And in doing so, we also then deploy smart grid technology like underground substations, because space is constrained in Mumbai, and those stations are also intelligent system. Those are the few things which probably has given us success in Mumbai. And while we transfer that to the rural India, we currently through the microgrid systems, which is again decent distribution systems, which we can talk about more on at a later point of time. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Manoj. I'm gonna go on to Eden and ask. You mentioned 40-year-old infrastructure, aging infrastructure, and maybe you could highlight some of the key initiatives that are underway to modernize that grid and be able to integrate renewables and meet your goals of 45% renewable energy by 2025 and 100% by 2050. What are some of the priorities in that process of modernizing that aging grid?
Thank you, Mark. Well, we're seeking private and public sector investments to scale up their involvement in improving our grid situation. But at the core of it, the utility itself, there's only one major utility on the island that services the main island and the outlying states. What's happening is we're doing what we can. We know it's an aging infrastructure, so we're doing the assessments, we're addressing the gaps, we're fixing what we can fix. But again, like I said, we put in a very big IPP that's at 30 megawatt, whereas our peak is at 12 megawatt. So we're having these issues about storage because we don't have any batteries on island. So we're trying to address those issues with an aging infrastructure, and then it comes with its challenges. So we're trying to do is seeking assistance, but also doing our due diligence and trying to improve it. What we're talking about, like improving the transmission and distribution networks, installing protective systems, changing up the substations, the switching gears, all of those needs to be addressed. First, in order to address what we're trying to do, because we're seeking assistance in actually establishing the battery system, but at the same time, we're trying to address all the necessary things that we have to do in terms of the grid, fixing all the things that are broken, replacing items that need to be replaced. So those are the things that we're trying to do. We're also asking some help from international experts that are providing their assistance to Palau for free of charge. They're very interested in the small islands, so we're doing all that we can in terms to address it, but like I said, we have our determined goal to try and achieve 70% by 2030. If we do what we can, if we fix all the things that we need to do, as well as find some investors that can help us in terms of the battery system, as well as some of the modernization issues, of course, like what we've been talking about with the other partners, maybe we can have a reliable power system for Palau. But in the meantime, we're still surviving, the power is still on. But like I said, all the necessary things that we need to address from policies, regulations, as well as addressing all the issues on the transmission and distribution lines, those are things that we need to address before we can actually say we have a reliable and resilient power system for Palau.
Let me ask this, as you go to 70% renewables, is it primarily central renewable plants, or is it distributed household, rooftop PV, local communities? What's the priority there?
So for the central system, and then for the rooftop solar systems are integrated into that. But for the outlying states and islands, we're going to do mini grids, and we're trying to do 100% for those, all renewables. We've tried a pilot project for one of the very isolated islands. We're at 65%, so if we follow the course and due course, hopefully we'll get all the outlying islands 100% renewable, and then hopefully address the bigger central system for Palau. So like I said, our new president is very, what's the word? He's very passionate. He's insist on it. He's been going around. He's at the UN Ocean right now. He's trying to say that Palau will reach 100% by 2032. That's his new target. So hopefully by 2032 we'll be 100%.
That's great. Let's let's move on to you. And you're worked in multiple areas around the world: South Africa, Colombia, Thailand. I'm wondering what are some of the strategies for aligning grid modernization with social justice and social equity that you've come across, particularly in regions that have historically been dependent on coal and fossil fuels?
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're working in 7 countries of the world on a just transition in coal regions. And one of the countries that we are working on is Chile. And as you're certainly aware of, Chile is one of the most dynamic markets or energy system transforming to renewable energies. But as you also know, it is a quite long country, and renewables are basically situated in the north, the solar energy in the Atacama Desert, and in the south in the wind and industrial centers. And of course, Santiago de Chile, the capital, is right in the middle. So what you need what became in the last years the bottleneck is the expansion of the grid. Chile faces dynamically growing curtailments because the grid capacity does not grow fast enough. And there's a big construction project which is 1,300 kilometers long, and it is expected to need 2,000 line workers in the next 5 years to realize this project. And the pool of line workers, there's a shortage of 800 qualified line workers. So people turned up to us because we, in our project from that we work in as GIZ in a larger consortium, also with other implementing agencies, asked whether we could support. And what we identified is that there are some quite very interesting experiences in Colombia. Colombia still is an important coal producer, while as Chile has already 15 years ago stopped coal producing and is only burning coal. So this is why Chile is participating in our project, because they want to phase out their coal-fired power plants. And in Colombia, between 2016 and 20, there was a huge need for line workers. And there started 2017 a project, and the three transmission line companies joined up and agreed upon that they asked, they established a system in which they estimate, if they commission a new transmission line, they estimate how many additional workers do they need, and then the companies who win the contracts have to pay for the qualification of the additionally needed potential of line workers. And the line workers are qualified by a private foundation called Tella Futuro, and they are doing for 1 year with 3 months first theoretical learning and then practice. For 1 year they get an education, and this is working quite well in Colombia, and this is why we thought, couldn't we transform this experience and bring it to Chile? And what I find very important also is that since 2023 they also women are participating. You know, this is hard work, it's also very dangerous work, and but women of course can do that as well, and there are many women who applied for the places for education that were there, and the first women participated. And what we are doing now is that we brought this foundation to Chile and had a workshop with transmission line companies. They signed a memorandum of understanding, and there's a process now of trying to establish a school for line workers in Chile. What I find especially encouraging from Colombia is also that the recruitment they did from the regions in which the transmission lines are being built. And this is the plan also in Chile, because I think it is very important that the local population can also gain something. And of course, transmission line, and also not only the creation, but then also the maintenance is providing some jobs. So it's good to make local people also participate, and we found it very inspiring what we saw and what we learned in Colombia, and we are hoping now the first steps are gone. So the definition of a qualification of line workers has been established from the National Labor Authority, and other steps are being taken to replicate somehow this encouraging experience from Colombia.
It's, the upskilling or retraining process, do you feel like there's a compatibility with jobs like for line workers or what needed for construction and operation of the transmission lines? Are there other programs? It seems like the opportunity for upscaling the experience maybe has been that it doesn't work for transitions to all types of careers, like maybe digital technologies and stuff doesn't work as well for the mining community or whatever. But just what's your experience in the success of these upskilling programs and the need to kind of align the opportunities with the previous qualifications of the workforce that's moving into that role?
Yeah, we saw, actually I once invited a researcher from India, actually, who worked on on analyzing what are the specific qualifications that mine workers have. And I mean, mine workers have a lot of qualifications. They are electricians, they are machinists, they are very different qualifications, and you can look at these qualifications and see where can we use them. And you find that these are highly qualified persons, but you can of course transform these qualifications to other sectors? I think this is the question of analyzing thoroughly and then giving some upscaling, rescaling, and that offers opportunities. Yeah, and it's always important also to integrate women, because the transformation to renewable energies also offers new opportunities to women.
Can I just add to his question?
Yeah,
like
please.
in Tata Power, what we have done, I have created an institute called Tata Power Skill Development Institute. Primary role is to upskill existing workforce to the new technology, and with focus on solar. Renewable is going to be the major one. So we have across 8 centers and across India, and people can come certify themselves. Short duration, long duration, and skill linkage programs are there. So that has been successful in taking those unskilled workers to new skill requirement, including women empowerment in that particular area. So that has been success for us.
Just to complement, in capacity building is key for all utility, because facing aging infrastructure, you need to have skilled workers. So what we learned, you know that based from our creation in 1970, we have had the High School of Engineers in Africa, the first one in 1978, where we train engineers, but from 2016, we launched the African Network of Centers of Excellence in Electricity with 10 Centers of Excellence, and in 8 years, we trained 9,000 people from utility. And now the second phase is launched with the African Development Bank for 2025, 2030, to train 10,000 people of utility and adapting the skill to transition in new technology and digitalization.
Pay me, finally. While we're on the social justice kind of theme, maybe we can start with that in South Africa as we're working through grid modernization efforts. How do we bring in social equity into the prioritizing of those investments, and particularly as we look at the needs of vulnerable and underserved communities?
Yes, thank you for that question, Mark. I think for South Africa, equity is at the heart of the just energy transition. Our approach to grid modernization explicitly includes a provision to ensure vulnerable and historically underserved communities are not left behind. And I think that is the mode of our just transition, that it should be whole society and inclusive, and no one should be left behind. And this includes expanding the grid access, prioritizing grid extension projects in rural, remote, and previously marginalized areas to improve energy access. We're also talking about supporting centralized systems. Here we're encouraging mini grids and embedding renewable energy solutions where traditional grid extension is not viable, with government support and community ownership models. We're also creating inclusive job opportunities. I think this also talks to the issues of recapacitating those previously educated in the coal sector, ensuring that the infrastructure projects related to grid upgrades generates employment and skills development opportunity for local communities, particularly women and the youth. We're also ensuring that the tariffs are affordable, so we're talking affordability and tariff reforms, working with energy regulators and utilities to ensure that energy pricing remains equitable, particularly for low-income households as we modernize and decarbonize the grid. Through these measures, grid modernization is not just about technology advancement, but it's about social justice and development impact. And that is the crux of not leaving anyone behind. Thank you.
That's great. Maybe you could, I think that the work that was done around the technology needs assessment process in South Africa is a best practices. Maybe you could just give us a few thoughts on that process and involving the different stakeholders in that process and how that's driving investment priorities in the future. I know that wasn't one of our prepared questions, but.
Well, on the issue of the technology needs assessment, grid enhancement was highlighted as essential in meeting both the mitigation goal and broader energy transition required under our nationally determined contributions. And as you rightly say, doing the national determined contribution requires different stakeholders that we have to consult and ensure that we're all aligned with what we want to communicate as our NDC. Modernizing the grid contributes to our NDC by enabling a large-scale integration of variable renewable energy sources such as wind and solar, which are key to decarbonizing the power sector. Without adequate transmissions and distribution infrastructure, even if renewable energy generation capacity increases, it cannot be effectively dispatched into the national grid. Therefore, grid expansion and digitalizations are critical to enable our low carbon transmission. For an example, our TNA, we identify several specific technology gaps related to grid modernization, and this included limited transmission capacity, particularly in renewable rich regions like the Northern Cape and the Eastern Cape. There was also insufficient grid infrastructure for real-time grid management and forecasting. So those were the kind of things that we were able to identify. And there was also a lack of smart grid technology to support decentralized generation and demand-side management. There's limited to local technical capacity to design, to implement and maintain advanced grid systems. These gaps have informed the prioritization of the investments in grid infrastructure under both our Technology Action Plan and our Just Energy Transition Investment Plan, what we call the JET-IP. Thank you.
Great. We do have some great questions. We're kind of winding down here, so I'm not going to get into these, but questions around how do we do this and maintain the cost to the customer, the tariffs at reasonable levels without them getting out of hand. There's a good question about the Spain blackout and what that means in terms of how we maintain resilience and supply integrity. But I'll leave those as important questions, and maybe we can go to a final Slido question, and then I'm going to get each of you a chance to talk about one takeaway that you are going to take back with you from this panel discussion. So this is a open-ended question for the audience. You can answer with a word or a few words, but we'd like to know from you guys what key action you believe should be prioritized to accelerate grid modernization in underserved regions. And so I'll leave that up there while we essentially ask the same question to you guys in terms of a key takeaway from this session and this topic that you're going to take back with you. Abel?
Yes. I think that for utility, we have been working, offering what we have. But now we need to focus what the customer needs. And as you see, the grid in Africa today, 44% of the country in Africa have less than 50% access. Very few have universal access, but among the people having access, more than 40% don't have reliable distribution. So the least customer, like Manoj say, the final customer is our focus. So the grid can be judged only if the final customer have energy and can pay. So the tariff for us is not an issue. We need to have the lowest losses in the grid. We need to have the highest efficiency to reliability to serve the customer will pay. Because what they spend on alternative way is more than the tariff that we deserve. So for us is to have the highest reliable grid so the customer will easily pay for what they need. Because today, energy is in the midst of their life. So the tariff is not an issue, is our management of the utility is the question. So well-managed utility, and finally, the type of the utility is not an issue. Public, private or not, is management issue. So well-managed utility, maximum hour of service, and you get the tariff, you get the customer paying you.
Just to take his point forward, very well said. See, tariff cost is the key driver for a customer to use power supply or energy, I would say. So he expects availability of power supply or the energy, reliability, quality, and affordability. Now, having said that, what's the solution? Today, if you extend the national grid to the rural areas, remote areas, the cost is going to be very, very high. Reliability get compromised, and the load to serve is very small, so the cost burden on the customer is going to be very, very high. The solution to that is decentralized renewable generation, transmission and distribution is one of the answer. As far as the technology is concerned, what we prefer to use solar as a one during the solar hours. Apart from the solar hours, we are working on a technology of biogas-based systems, which is based on agri-based economy. So most of the remote areas have agri as a economy. So you integrate the agri waste into biogas generation, and from biogas you produce electricity or the thermal energy to take care of the energy requirement of end customer. And this being in the center of that village or the hamlets, the cost of production, operation and maintenance is low. And number two is you will deploy resources of those village or the hamlet by upskilling to operate those energy systems. And while we do so, it is also imperative that we provide energy efficient income generating assets in that village or hamlet. And lastly, while income is good, expenses are also brought down so that profitability can increase. And on bringing the expenses down, what we're talking about energy efficient appliances, for example, BLDC fans, LED lamps, and low energy consuming heater systems. Now, once you have this ecosystem built in, including the digital technology, for example, digital payment will be part of the rural area. If that system is developed, then you have a green ecosystem viable for a rural customer. Thank you.
Very good. Aiden.
So I developed some answers, so I should read it. As a small developing country but a large ocean state, the overarching issue that confronts us is to find ways to enhance energy assurance. Because in the islands, it's not really about, do I have power? It's really about, when's the power coming on? So you talk about energy security, asset protection and all that. But at the end of the day, in the islands, it's, do I have power? So a lot of challenges are facing small island states, whether it's climate change and other issues. But to notice that we need to mobilize and strengthen our transmission and our power grid itself, that's the biggest takeaway I'm taking from this panel, as well as from the presentations beforehand. Because if I have this IPP that gives me 13 megawatt and my peak is at 12, if I don't have a strong grid, there's no way I can, maximize the use of the renewable energy integration. So address the basic fundamental power infrastructure, and I think we can, excuse me, I can move Palau forward. Thank you.
Beautiful. Gabs?
Yeah, I think we must combine renewable energies are competitive, but we need finance. We need to provide finance to accelerate the investment, to accelerate the investment in infrastructure, and for that we need the blended finance. So public finance that must deliver security for private investment in large scale, and that will provide the investment, combine that with all the qualification that is necessary, and then we can develop a socially just and very viable energy system based on renewable energies. We have everything, but we must combine it and do that quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I will also say financing is something that is also important. And not only that, but capacity building and institutional strengthening. This is often about physical infrastructure, but we must also strengthen capacity of grid operators, regulators and planners to manage complex systems. I think this is where the issue of reskilling comes in, and repurposing. Integrate new technologies and engage communities meaningfully in the transition to ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you.
On this financing part, in India, what we have seen that public-private partnership in the generation segment, transmission and distribution has been successful, which has helped us to finance projects. Thank you.
We didn't really get into, there are a few questions also around energy storage and the role of energy storage in accomplishing a lot of the goals that we've been talking about. So we'll leave with that in the back of our mind of how we make that a priority as well, since it's a lot of times designing markets and designing incentives to support investments in energy storage are a little tricky. And as Spain illustrated, sometimes we don't have enough energy storage. And so that becomes an interesting part of the equation as we look at these technology alternatives. I want to thank you guys. It's been a great panel. And so I'm going to ask for one round of applause for this great discussion here. And I think I'm supposed to summarize briefly some of the themes, and I think we got a good summary in our last section here. But I will mention an advertisement for the IRENA guides around the innovation landscape, because I think what you'll find is a lot of the things that we talked about in terms of technology options and innovation that's going on around the world, that the landscape, these documents are a great support and information resource as you look at prioritizing investments and innovation approaches. I think the theme of the customer first, we always talk about that, but looking from the customer out, that's where the need for resiliency comes from. Is the power there or not? All of our talk about flexibility and making the grid more efficient is really about making our investments as effective as possible to reduce the ultimate cost to the consumer of a reliable and sustainable energy system. So keeping the customer at the center of those decisions is absolutely critical. But we do need investment. Even in Europe, the Grids for Speed project that was done a couple of years ago, and we just talked about at the Euroelectric conference last week, is estimating that we need to double our investment every year in a distribution grid, for instance, between now and 2040. Besides investing in communities and flexibility and supporting local resources and storage, the grid is really what ties it all together and allows us to operate in an optimum fashion. So finding ways to, around the investment approaches and financing and regulatory approaches are a challenge for all of us. So with that, I'm going to adjourn this session and thank the panel one more time. Thank you very much.